joining us. This is Josh Garrett. I am Director of Events for the Bay Area chapter of the Children's Media Association, and we're super excited to be holding this panel. We'll give it a few minutes to allow people to trickle in. If you're just joining us, you can go ahead and maybe post where you are in the comments. I am in San Francisco, and Sydney, our guest, I believe. Are you in LA, Sydney?
I'm in LA, yeah.
And Aaron is in Providence, Rhode Island, correct?
I am.
We're a bi-coastal panel here. And before we start, I just want to talk a little bit about the Children's Media Association. If you're not a member, you can consider joining. We have a lot of great benefits like job boards, networking, mentoring, and panels and things like this. And if you are at all interested in tech specifically, we encourage you to join the Bay Area chapter, where we focus a lot on interactive technology for kids, more so than traditional media. And hi, Joel. It's good to see you joining from Baltimore. We're going to basically have a discussion for about 45 minutes, and then we'll end with questions. So if you have any questions at all, please post them in the chat, and then we will get to those questions at the end of our time. So I think we'll go ahead and get started with some introductions. So I will just first introduce myself as the moderator. In addition to my role at the CMA, I have been in the toy industry for almost 25 years now, helping companies and brands make products for kids. I've worked with almost every toy company you can imagine and children's brand, and a lot of amazing, amazing people in those industries. And our two guests today are some of my absolute favorites. So I'm super delighted to have them. We'll start with Sydney Wiseman, who until very recently was a vice president at Wowie Toys and the absolute creative force behind many recent hits for Wowie Toys. And I'm actually going to start by showing you all a short video of some of Sydney's recent products.
Those are the cutest baby monkeys. They go where you go. Fingerlings, each sold separately.
Got to glow fairies, catch the magic glow.
Find tons of different fairies with the Got to Glow Fairy Finder. When I close the lid, they're mine to care for. Find fairies everywhere. I caught an upside down fairy and a candy fairy. My friends and I love to trade because there's over 30 unique fairies in each jar. There's even fairies that can only be found in the dark. The more you play, the more virtual fairies you'll find. Hello. Hello. Each sold separately. Will you find them all?
Meet Doggy, the 1 in a million robot dog. What colors and personality will your doggy have? It loves to be pet and always wants to play. I can feed Doggy treats and teach it tricks. You can save different doggies for whatever you want to do or whoever wants to play. There's a doggy for everyone. Because this robot dog is as unique as you. Bring home your doggy today.
So great products. Sydney, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the business of play?
So I'm Sydney Wiseman. I make toys, and how I got into the business of play. Well, I was born into the business of play, but I think even from a really, really young age, I know all kids love toys, but there was a different love for toys. And my grandfather had an expression, "You can't spoil a good thing," which I 10 on 10 recommend. And he used to take me to Toys R Us every Sunday, and I got a toy, and I was able to have every single Barbie, Polly Pocket, you name it. And apparently the way that I would play with the toys was very much in a why I like this and what features I like about it, even from a really young age. So it was kind of destined. And then I ended up studying business. All my projects, even in business school, were always kid related. And my teachers were like, you have to go work for a toy company. And lo and behold, my uncles had started this amazing toy company called Wowie, very much in the robotics space. And when I started there, being very pink and glittery. And I was like, I think we need to look at diversifying our product line. And they allowed me kind of to take the reins and do that. And 2017 came up with this idea for a toy called Fingerlings, and turned out to be quite the toy. And then now here we were. So I was there for 10 years making toys, loving what I do, truly the most passionate about the toy space. On the side, my sister is a family doctor and sees kids as well. And a lot of our conversations ended up being about toys I could give her to bring into the doctor's office. And that led to a bigger conversation. So something I can't say yet, it's in stealth, but working on something that combines the two in a really nice way.
That's great. And for anyone watching who doesn't know the toy space, Fingerlings is one of those toys in the vein of Tickle Me Elmo that was the big hot toy of multiple seasons. So many congratulations on that. So let's now turn to Aaron. Aaron, I'm just going to show a short video of a recent product that you worked on that will give a little background on what you do.
What if we could make a change in the lives of children with cancer right now?
I was told that, I'm sorry, your daughter has cancer, and I was just in total shock.
Everything's really new in the beginning, and I have no idea what to expect.
Each year, more than 15,000 kids are diagnosed with cancer in the US, and the average length of treatment is 1,000 days. And so we thought about the need for emotional comfort for these children. And now we have the opportunity to bring the latest in social robotics into the field of medicine, bringing comfort and joy through this daunting process.
Oh, that's awesome.
What we try to do here is to give children the tools to understand what's going on and to empower them.
For our family and for Wyatt, the best use would be to help him communicate and a friend to comfort him when he's having treatment.
Play is natural to a child. Play is really how they learn and how they process.
So we leveraged play and some of the latest technology to create healthcare tools for kids with illness. Everybody knows the Aflac Duck. We wanted to bring the Aflac Duck to life into a caring companion for children with cancer. It responds and moves in a lifelike and natural way. They could feed their ducks, bathe their ducks, and when you tap these different cards to the duck's chest, it behaves with that feeling to help children communicate their feelings. By the time the duck is shipping, we will have spent 18 months designing, testing, and iterating with hundreds of families, doctors, and experts.
Hi, Levi.
What do you think the duck is doing?
Singing.
Duck is singing.
Yes.
First and foremost, the duck is a constant companion for children throughout their treatment journey.
He's kind of cute.
He's kind of cute. Candy's going to do some breathing, and we're going to kind of match her breathing.
Just a
Tiny bit faster.
Perhaps most important of all, the ducks can share in the patient's experience.
Actually, good job. Yeah, look at this. Packy's also getting one. Yeah.
I think it's so awesome. You just feel comfort, with something like that.
I really like the Aflac Duck to be your friend, to help you get through all your tough times here.
I think the duck has the potential to have a huge impact on our patients, our families, and our healthcare program as a whole.
So technically y'all want to make it happen to give everybody one or something?
That's the goal.
If she has something to sit with her, something that can take her through it. A friend that will always be there. And that would help a lot of kids.
I'm not crying.
That's amazing.
It's a beautiful video, Aaron. So, Aaron, why don't you talk a little bit about how you got here? How did you get to a place to make such an amazing product?
Yeah, so I was initially kind of inspired by my own childhood experience. I grew up with something called human growth hormone deficiency. And so I gave myself injections for about 5 years on a daily basis to grow. And it had a pretty profound impact on me. I remember, sitting in so many doctors' offices and truly not understanding what was going on, not being included in a conversation about my own healthcare. And it sounds very similar, Sydney, to the conversations, that you had with your sister. And when I was in college, I helped start an organization called Design for America, which is all about how we use this process of design thinking, doing what we're doing in that video, going out and talking with people who are experiencing problems. And our first challenge was, how do we improve the lives of people with type 1 diabetes? And when we went out and we interviewed children and their parents, all of the families we interviewed, they would take a stuffed animal and they would give it diabetes. They would inject their teddy bears. They would draw little insulin pumps on pieces of paper. And kids were, not surprisingly, using play to act out everything that was going on in their world and to gain an aspect of control. So 11 years ago, I founded Empath Labs. We used to be called Sproutel. And we make toys that are tools that help children understand their health and help them emotionally engage in their care.
That's fantastic. In looking at both your videos, play is core to both of them in very different ways. And I think we all know, as being people in the play industry, that play goes beyond just fun. Fun is critically important, but play can take you somewhere else. And I'm going to ask each of you to share a story about when that really hit home for you. I'll start with my own, which is in 2001 when I made my first ever toy in the toy industry, which is this Barney there. I keep this here because of this story. I always keep this Barney with me. And at the time, I thought Barney was kind of stupid, I have to say. I love you left and right and all this stuff. And the designer I was working with at Fisher-Price made this comment that just changed my whole perspective. And she said that, there are a lot of kids out there for whom Barney saying I love you is the only time they're going to hear that all day. And it still kind of chokes me up that the power that play can have that goes beyond fun is just so important for what we do. And so I'll start with you, Sydney. Do you have a story about when it really hit home for you?
I think there's actually been many cases in terms of when I realized, wow, there's so much more than just making a toy for Christmas morning. It's so funny, in the toy industry, it's like Christmas is your big day. But actually recently, and I was going to say this is my favorite story ever, but to your point about diabetes, a mom wrote me on TikTok saying, I just have to let you know that thank you so much for fingerlings because my kid has type 1 diabetes and he has to get his finger pricked all the time and it's traumatic for him. And so what they started doing was they took a fingerling, put it on their we had a dragon fingerling back in the day in 2018. And he would put the dragon fingerling on his finger and it was the protector of his finger. And that literally got him through his shots. And it was perfect timing because it's very similar to what I am looking at doing and where I'm going with my next endeavor. But it was wow, toys really serve kids' imaginations are wild. And I always say, even looking at the landscape in just kids' health right now, people think that you throw a license on something and it makes it fun for a kid. But I think really play and using their imagination and how does this item go into the story of what they're going through, I think is really where toys can help tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron, I imagine you might have learned this lesson earlier given your background.
Yeah, growing up, toys were something that was used for me actually. When I went to the doctor, I would often get a small, like a coin-op toy, the 25-cent machines where you turn and get something out. But I distinctly remember a line of, they were Pokemon and they were plush and you zipped them in one direction and they were a Pokeball and you insided them out and they were the Pokemon. And I would get one of those every time I went to the endocrinologist. And so that was a moment for me personally. And then as you can imagine, from that video, there are so many moments in the past 10 years where, I think of one in particular where we were in the room of a cancer patient who was also nonverbal and neurodivergent. And they used those emoji tokens, these feeling cards that come with the duck, and they were tapping them on the duck's chest. And the doctor, after they left the room, they said that that was one of the first times that they had seen that child be able to emote, be able to express how they were feeling through the duck as a proxy. And so, gosh, every time we see a child who's able to use play, and often in different ways with the same products, to do something to communicate with a caregiver, often by taking the stress off of them, it just warms my heart.
That's amazing. Yeah. So when we start to talk about how play and health-related items meet, we have seen in traditional toys, I've seen over the years attempts to get certain health aspects into toys. For example, regularly in toy development, there will be an idea of, well, let's get kids up and active, like physically moving, because that's good for them. Over the last few years, there's been a lot of meditation, right? Elmo started talking about belly breathing, and that comes into toys. Or the newest Purrbe, there's a meditation mode, right? So is that good? I mean, do you think that that's a good thing? Is it to take something kind of really superficially and put it and not make it the focus? Or are there other examples you can think of that in traditional toys of how to approach that?
You go for it.
I think it's great. I think more of it should happen, and whether or not it has a therapeutic benefit, just, working the concepts, whether it's mindfulness, even whether it's the Fisher-Price doctor's kit, right? These are things that kids, as we all know in the industry, they take it and they run with it. And it might resonate with some kids, it might fall flat on others, but I think it's surprising, especially when you read, I love reading the Amazon reviews of products and seeing how people just adopt things in the most interesting ways. And I think the example of fingerlings is a great example, because you might have a family that takes a toy that was designed maybe purely for entertainment or enjoyment and adopts it and creates a whole framework to use it in a therapeutic way, and vice versa.
Totally. And I think back to the Purrbe thing and playing on why toy companies are really starting to do this, because we definitely at WowWee started looking at that and bringing in OTs into our product development, even for categories that we're not necessarily saying that this is going to be a meditation toy, or we did these little dolls, they're fashion fidgets and they're little fidget dolls. But again, working with an OT to make sure that the sensory features that we're putting in here are actually beneficial to kids. I think in addition to a lot of these things becoming almost like buzzwords in toys, I think the truth is ADHD and autism and people understanding the spectrum. Occupational therapists, people understanding the kind of the spectrum and how many kids actually fall on the spectrum in different ways. I think it's really nice that people are being so much more mindful of sensory issues, or something like an OT told me, in terms of just vibration and how much it helps a kid. You pull his tail and this thing vibrates, and just that alone for a little infant in their crib is enough to actually have them calm down and breathe. It's very rewarding to be able to add all those things into the toys that we're making these days.
Yeah, and just for the record, I agree. I think it's fantastic to, if nothing else, the exposure for kids to understand what meditation is, and that there are times how to self-regulate, and so on and so forth. And yeah, the marketing aspect or how that's claimed is a whole different question. But for those of us who are designing play, I do think that these are great areas. Now, aside from activity and mindfulness, have you seen any other recent attempts to bring in, more health related items into toys or into products, more mass products rather than specialty products?
I've seen a lot of really interesting, social emotional learning tools. I think the Moxie robot, which was on maybe another CMA panel.
Last one.
Yeah, I mean, tools like that are great. And, I don't want to speak too much about our own products, but that's kind of the area that we play in, is using and leveraging the concept of a toy in these purely healthcare contexts. And so we see it, in the ways that we're using it really for things like, how might we improve medication adherence? How might we change patient experience? How might we do things like retain patients in clinical trials that are discovering new treatments and cures for rare diseases, where the child's engagement in the study, the child's experience is critical to the discovery of these new treatments and helping to prove their efficacy. And so I think play can be an amazing tool, even when it's used outside of the toy world itself, outside of the consumer world. How does it infiltrate into these other industries where things could stand to be a little bit more fun.
Yeah, and I'm all for you talking about your own products, Aaron. So maybe this is a good time to talk about what you found. I mean, what are you finding, either through studies or more specifics of the types of play you designed in order to get benefits in the healthcare setting?
Yeah, I mean, so the basis of all of our products come down to this concept of control, right? You know, kids use play as a way of sort of controlling their world. And in a healthcare context, children lose pretty much every aspect of control. Just to take pediatric cancer, for example, you could be diagnosed and the next week you are leaving school and 5 days a week you're getting chemo, right? And so what we found is that by mirroring medical procedures between yourself and your companion, whether it's giving your duck chemotherapy by attaching a chemo port to its chest, which comes along with it, or checking, your bear's blood sugar, these aspects allow kids to sort of reframe some of these experiences and reframe them in a narrative in which they are empowered and in a narrative which they are in control. And what we know that does is it helps alleviate things like anticipatory anxiety. It helps reduce the distress for children and their parents. And it just makes some of the conversations around illness in the home, and I'm speaking broadly about all of our products now, but it makes the conversations easier because it's not about, hey Josh, did you check your blood sugar today? It's like, hey Josh, did we check Rufus's blood sugar today? Oh no, let's check Rufus's blood sugar together. Oh, it's your turn now, right? And so it shifts the whole conversation around illness in the home, and it puts the child at the same level as their caregiver, as kind of a care collaborator. And so it helps them gain empathy for why mom or dad is pricking or sticking or poking me, They're doing it because they love me, just like I love my companion and I want to care for my companion. Wow. So we're seeing it in all sorts of different ways have these amazing impacts.
It's really interesting. I think it's not controversial at this point to say that play, when we think about play, even in the animal kingdom, right? It's practice. It's practicing situations where you're safe in order to, when you get into a dangerous or a bad situation, you have practice, right? And usually I think we think of it as the play session is something that happens and then the dangerous, scary thing is later and separate. But in your implementation or what you're experiencing, it's like it's all together. You're doing the practice while it's happening.
Yeah, and in doing that, it's kind of remapping some of those mental pathways for the child. So if you're getting an injection, you're getting your blood drawn, right? Like that's a pathway of saying, this is going to be scary. I am anxious. I am getting afraid. I'm getting distressed. And now I'm in pain, right? And if we remap that to, oh, I'm in control. I am controlling and doing the action. I'm drawing the blood of my stuffed animal. I'm giving them an injection. Oh, I know what's going to happen. I'm empowered. Yes, I felt pain, but I get a little bit of joy. And we have these kind of little nice dopamine cycles in our products so that you get a little bit of a reward when you do things. Well, that's now a whole different understanding of what's about to happen. And if you do that again and again and again, day after day after day, and you're starting on a new therapy or you're starting on a new treatment or you're participating in a clinical trial, well, gosh, that is now a reframing of the entire experience. And I don't want to say we make disease joyful because that's, that would be a huge overstatement, but we can insert these moments of joy into the care process that make children so much more empowered and make them connect with their illness. So their illness isn't this other thing, that they have ownership over it. They're proud of it. And there are direct linkages. There's amazing research that shows that when you have ownership over your illness, you're more adherent to your therapy, you're more compliant, you have better medical outcomes. So there's really cool things that happen from these softer sides of care.
Totally. And I actually don't think it's not necessarily just in a illness environment. Like my sister she's a family doctor, she sees kids, and I gave her fingerlings to put on her stethoscope. This is actually like the inspiration for what we're working on now. To your point, when you empower kids, if you give them choice, okay, do you want the blue monkey to listen to your heart or do you want the pink monkey to listen to your heart? They pick the pink monkey. They're now in control of the listening to the heart. Whereas before it was like, why is this person taking this freezing cold stethoscope, putting it on me without asking me if I was part of, like, as if I'm not part of what's happening to me at all. Once you put them in the world and you add them into the storytelling component as to what's going on, that's where kids' imaginations, they're so wonderful how kids think and how everything is, they think in play, right? Like that is their foundation. And so you bring them into these sterile environments and you're like, not only am I going to devoid you of play, but I'm going to actually put you in the scariest chamber of your life with all of these tools that are literally frightful, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And it's like, wow, that is so, and it's as easy as being like, what fingerling do you want to listen to your heart? And then all of a sudden, the whole experience after is better. And even at a younger age, what my sister, as we're starting to test a lot of the things that we're working on, it's funny, like I made her something for her otoscope, and 5-month-olds, they don't understand anything, but they were so enamored by what it looked like that they didn't cry when she checked in their ears. Great. And one step further, now she's like, okay, when she saw them again at their 8th-month checkup, they didn't even flinch at this because they were used to seeing it, and it wasn't scary the first time that they saw it. So therefore, this time they're already, okay, this is a safe thing that it didn't stress me out. It wasn't forced in my ear last time. I was enamored by what it looked like. And I think if you start even infusing some of these play and this storytelling into the health world when they're really young, you're only shots hurt. They're always going to hurt, but it's the experience of the shot that makes it that kids are literally traumatized every time they go back for a vaccine. And if they had a positive experience getting a vaccine that was like, it hurt, but you were brave and you got a sticker, and I'm going to do this super thing that's going to make it hurt a little bit less, their experience going the next time, anxiety is half the problem, right? So if you're catering, and that's why your duck is so wonderful, because it really caters to the anxieties that heighten everything else bad that's going on. It's like, here's your starting point of breathing and feeling calm and feeling joy and feeling at ease for a few moments to make everything else seem a little bit better and more rational.
Yeah, I mean, you said anxiety is 50% of it. I think the anxiety is probably more like 90% of it.
Oh.
And there's a wonderful moment in the video we played of the duck where there's that kid who is literally screaming, and then the moment the child realizes that this duck has the port 2 and says, "Oh, can I try it?" It's like anxiety is gone. The kid is fine. It's magical. It's absolutely magical. And Aaron, I'm wondering, in terms of the duck, things like the play cards, the emotional things, those seem to be super valuable outside of cancer, right? I mean, it just seems like there's a lot there. The port play obviously is very specific, but have you used it for other conditions or outside of the hospital, or where else have you seen it bring value?
Yeah, so this is just as a little bit of background. It's called My Special Aflac Duck. Not many people know that Aflac's corporate cause is pediatric cancer, and so we embodied their mascot and brought this to life. It's now a philanthropic campaign. It's donated at 450 children's hospitals across the country, and we've reached about 26,000 kids who get to keep this and take it home. We expanded its use from cancer actually to all blood disorders with a focus on sickle cell disease. Wow. And so we actually created, I have it behind me, but a toolkit just for sickle cell disease, a whole different set of accessories, because these children experience pain crises. They are needing to do things like bundle up during temperature transitions, take hydroxyurea every day, communicate their feelings, their pain to their caregivers. And we've seen immense benefit for these kids and just for the stories that we hear back from families. So, you're absolutely right. The tool that we've developed here has a lot of broad application. I think probably even broader application beyond those disease areas, although our program is kind of bounded by what we're able to do from a funding standpoint. But we've certainly seen for some of our other products like Purrble, huge uptake in the neurodivergent community in using these tools, which can help children express, or even adults express themselves and how they're feeling.
Yes, and obviously, in addition to physical health, mental health is a massive arena that I do think we see a lot more. Traditional toys can be super beneficial. I've had many cases looking at Amazon reviews. of working on a product and finding it just suddenly becoming a huge hit with, parents of autistic children or things like that. Do either of your products, have you found that kind of home for them where they're particularly successful in terms of the mental health or children on the spectrum or things like that?
Well, we had that. So with fashion fidgets, we had a lot of parents write into us being that this was actually, they were allowed to bring this to school. And it was just like, for a lot of kids with ADHD, having the ability to fidget with something actually makes them much better at focusing. And so that was one in which we saw that dual benefit from them. We were like, wow, and that was actually what started us being like, we should be looking more into how do we really bring in proper occupational therapists and start doing this in a really proper way. And when we partnered with Super Simple, we started with Super Simple Sensory, looking at a lot of those things, like what can we put in here that really helps kids of all, whether neurotypical or atypical, in terms of making better toys that way. And then, I think we don't do it yet in the Wowie toys, but I really do think, and I love what you do with the duck, with the chip, with the emojis, and then looking at Tea Turtle on Amazon, like for kids to understand, emotions are such a huge concept that they really don't understand. And I find this emojis have really made it wonderful for kids to be able to express, am I feeling happy or sad, and they don't even understand a lot of the time why they're feeling sad or know to even say that they're feeling sad. And it's really interesting to see all of these toys emerging that it's like, I feel this way right now. And hey, mom, I'm feeling this way, and I didn't know how to express it. And that's why I'm having this tantrum, but it's really just because I'm feeling. And I really love where the toy world is going with respect to all of these things.
Yeah. And I'll turn to you in a sec, Aaron, for this, but I just want to add that my eternal reminder from Barney is that there are a lot of kids out there who can't talk to their parents about how they're feeling. And so having some way to express it, even if it's a toy, can be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and I think that concept of kind of speaking through your toys, using them as a proxy for yourself is something that we think about a lot in the products that we create. It's something that Purrble is really designed around. This is a product that we make that is for helping people find calm. It has a little heartbeat that when you pet, its heartbeat slows. And we designed it for children. And yet it has had a huge uptake. I think about 30% of our customers are adults, and a lot of neurodivergent folks. And a lot of what we designed around the product, the fact that it doesn't have a mouth, so you can't tell what it's feeling. It makes little sounds that are all inscrutable. You can't tell if they're happy sounds or sad sounds. It gives what we refer to as the largest surface area for projection. All of these are amazing tools for projection, whether it be for a child or an adult who's neurodivergent. And the more scaffolding that we can create, the more they can project their imagination onto it, what they think, what they feel. And as Sydney was saying, kids have this amazing ability to bring things to life with their imagination. And so that's something that we thought a lot about with this product, is how do we make it really as simple as possible so that it can then have the most embodied experience that the child, that the adult, that whoever is using it can give it to help them with whatever issue they're having.
That's really where you see the difference between kids and adults and like play. We have a fairy jar, like similar to what you're saying about like no face, and adults look at it, they're like, why isn't there a face, right? And like, or we made this fairy jar that catches virtual fairies, and everyone was like, there has to be a fairy that comes in it. And I was like, no, there doesn't. Kids are gonna see the fairy that's in it, right? Like, and so we had someone once sent me a video of a kid walking around their house with the fairy jar catching fairies, and she magically, because there was a screen that showed you like kind of the type of fairy that you caught, and she caught a water fairy when she was in the bathroom. When I say that this kid was like, oh my God, I knew it. I knew I was going to catch the water fairy because she was in the bathroom. And I was like, yeah, that's their imagination. She sees this fairy. And that same mom wrote us that now it became a bedtime activity. Like as her bedtime prep was, she's allowed to catch 3 bedtime fairies in her room. And that was her steps in terms of getting into bed. And it made her going to bed much more easy, which again, talk about toys that have multi-purposes and you never know. So really, kids' imaginations are one of the most special things.
Yeah, it's hard to beat. I want to take 1 second just to remind everyone watching, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will have some Q&A at the end. So let's talk about specifically designing for hospitals and healthcare. And I think, Aaron, you're the true expert on this. How is it different? And from regulatory and the difficulties, and to just how do you design for play differently?
Yeah, so I think that at a base level, there's kind of the functional constraints. So for us, we think about do no harm. So for the hospital, your lowest barrier to entry is infection control. Can this thing be sterilized? Can it be cleaned if it's going to be used in a hospital setting, particularly for people maybe with compromised immune systems? So we designed, like the duck, for example, actually has removable fur. So you can take this off, you can machine wash it, you can swap them if you need to. So things like that kind of at a base level. Then I think the next level that's really interesting is designing the scaffolding of the interaction. So a lot of how it's going to be used in a healthcare setting is all about how do you train, if it's a child life specialist, who are these amazing people in hospitals who will help children use play to understand what they're going through. And that's who we work primarily with in hospitals. It's helping give them the tools to then use this and implement it with patients. And so we actually make a curricula. It's a set of really cool laminated cards so that you can do things like use the duck for diaphragmatic breathing. How do you use the duck before a port access to prep a child for an IV? And it's visual 1, 2, 3, 4. This is how you can go through and do those things. And we even have a guide of how do you make DIY medical accessories. So giving your duck a mask, giving them an Omnia cap, a feeding tube, by taking the existing tools in the hospital, and we show you how to cut, where to cut, how to tape, and literally make it into a demonstration aid for whatever you're trying to show. So kind of the functional requirements is one. Next is then what we think a lot about is how do you make it accessible? Because not everybody has the time to be super creative and come up with, hey, this is how I'm going to use it. So sometimes it's helpful to have a little guidance. And then the third level is if you're making claims. And I think that's where things get really interesting. If you want to say that there's some type of a therapeutic benefit, then there's a whole different level of rigor that you need to go through to show that. And it really varies. It varies, from what classification of medical device or what type of marketing claim you want to make. It's an area that we're dipping a few feet into now. And it gets really interesting because it's the intersection of everything that we've been talking about and the data to back it up. And, unfortunately, it's not quite as easy as it is to even, go through the toy safety and certification process. This is, really looking at trials that are randomized where you can show, a statistically significant improvement on whatever you're trying to do. And then if you're going into the medical device area or software regulated medical device for apps, it's another category.
So the duck does have an app, and Sydney, the minted doggy, has an app. Now I know there's a lot of ongoing questions about screen time for kids, apps and all of that. So is that a concern, and why? What makes you decide to have an app in addition to the product in both of these cases?
I think in the case of toys, I think screen time is a different. Parents are very mindful of screen time more so than ever, I feel, these days. And I think when we design toys, especially something like we feel passionately about, if we're going to do a robot, it has to work 100% without needing an app. I never want a kid Christmas morning to wake up and have to go download something and I want them to be able to play with their toy right out of the box. Really, really important to me forever, since I started making toys. However, I think when you're restricted by price points and you're building robots, I think people have these expectations as to what your robot's supposed to do. And there's only so much that you can put in, even though we could literally make this robot dog fly. If I probably had to, it would probably be a $700 flying robot, So I think when it comes to making the best toy that does the most amount of features, having that app component is a really nice, not bonus, because it is quite expensive and very time consuming, Josh, as you know. But I do think it can triple the play value of the toy that you're making in an incredibly affordable and modifiable way in our case for why we do it. You can always update, you can always change things around, and yeah, it just makes you a little bit more flexible. But don't not having it 100% as part of the play, not where I'm at by any means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? What'd you say?
Oh, I said I could not agree more.
Okay. I was like, oh no, does your duck only need a nap?
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, it has to be the kind of complete interaction without like from your lips to whoever's ears. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe with the duck as an example, if a child does have an app, like what does that enable that you can't have without that? And
yeah, I mean, I think this concept of kind of the product being fully functional and then the app enabling a level of enhanced play. So for us, the app, you can feed your duck and it's Bluetooth connected, so the duck will catch the foods. You can do a lot of our play revolves around using augmented reality to simulate medical procedures. So you can give your duck an NG tube, you can connect it to a virtual IV, you can use cold spray to prepare the Portacath site for Portacath injection. And then you can also do really fun things. And this is a lot of stuff that we worked with creativity to bring to life. But you can make music, you can make art, you can go to different planets and design your own soundscapes to give kids control over the comforting environments that are also triggered by their little soundscape spaceship that blasts you off to the planets. So it gives a lot of, all sorts of different interaction. It's something that's updatable. When we moved into sickle cell disease, we added the ability to, administer hydroxyurea and have a water bottle because hydration is really important. So it allows for all of these things that, you might not want to put into the fully featured duck, but we can riff on and build on over time. And all of our products, actually, with the exception of Purrble, have an app. And a lot of our products, our duck is our most advanced, but most of our products are stuffed animals that have play value with, different types of physical bendable components, but then have these essentially glorified QR codes to allow for that augmented reality medical care. And as we've looked at what product architecture gets us sort of the lowest price point, the most accessible product, the easiest thing to distribute in a healthcare setting where you can throw this whole thing in the washing machine, we've moved a lot towards this app plus physical architecture to allow kids to have some of these experiences.
That makes perfect sense. Let's talk a little bit about what's next in play, in healthcare, or just in play. What do you see coming up in terms of exciting developments or new technologies, or even just your own, interests? Sydney, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think in terms of what I'm allowed to say, and I will be able to share more eventually, but I'm working on something very much in this space and very much a big believer of everything that we've been talking about here. I think where the focus on what I'm working on, not more or less, and like, I just think storytelling, and you mentioned something in terms of the training, and the nurses and the doctors are so important in the plan of making healthcare more fun. They have to, number one, subscribe to it. It can't take up any more time. And it's sad, but it's the truth. Like, they're doctors, you sit in a pediatric exam and it's like boom, 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 boom. Like, they're machines, and it's like, and it's great. And it's all part of it. And that helps see more kids. So I think the easier that we're able to help them with the storytelling, I think what I'm learning as I speak to doctors and to parents, because I'm focusing, I think, a little bit more on how to make health at home more fun. And when you talk to moms and dads, sometimes they just don't know the story that they should be telling to make it a little bit more playful. So I think that's really where my focus is how do we add more storytelling and play into the healthcare day? And by offering tools that help do that too, but also just offering content and just story, like, try this. Like, when you go to bed, rock your monkey to bed, and then we'll go to bed together. It's just, they need that prompt. Not everyone thinks like a kid.
Amen to that, because, I've worked on toys in the past, or there's one I'm very involved in now where there's occasionally people are like, well, that's what the parent should be doing, and it's easy to forget that not all parents are equipped to be storytellers, to read books to their kids in a fun, exciting way. And similarly, certainly not all healthcare providers, even pediatricians who are focused on kids, are equipped to bring story and fun and play to kids. And that's, I think, what both of you are doing so beautifully.
And they all want it. When you sit down with them and you say it, they're all like, we really want this, but we're so bound to like pricing and costs and efficient clinics. And I understand all of that too. But like, it's like my sister says, as I started giving her more storytelling tools to try, she's like, if I can get a 5-month-old to stop crying, that saves me time, and it makes my overall experience that much more enjoyable. And then when I'm if I didn't have a 5-month-old screaming her head off, and then I going to the next patient after that, my whole mood is different because the situation before was better, So yeah, I totally welcome it as long as it's not going to delay my day 3 hours, which is, I totally understand also. But
I see a question has come up in the comments from Sean for you, Aaron. When you're working with hospitals, who is the decision maker? You spoke about a lot of touch points, care specialists, and so on. And so who ends up making the decisions?
Yeah, the answer is that it varies pretty broadly hospital by hospital. So, with my Special Aflac Duck program, fortunately, it's a philanthropic program. So this is really about getting buy-in to go through and administer it, not necessarily buy-in for budget. So often we're dealing with child life professionals, or we're dealing with folks who run the programs of the hospital, and sometimes even the fundraising. And through that, then we actually help. And we just did a big kind of effort last year to document of the 450 hospitals that are using this, what are some different types of hospitals and how do they actually implement the program? And so we created more or less blueprints for how a hospital who's a freestanding hospital, who's a nonprofit hospital, all the way down to a disease camp, how can you take this and how can you implement it? Because I think what we were just saying that's so powerful is you can't put all of the responsibility on the product to do its job. Really, it's 90% on the facilitation and administration of the product, right? If it's not given at the right time, if it's not facilitated in the right way, if it's not introduced in the right way, if it's not used in the moments where it can have the opportunity to alleviate anxiety, then it's not, best leveraged. So I hope that's striking at what that person was asking. Yeah. Fortunately, well, you got to go to the one person who will make your decision.
I think it does, but it makes me think of another question, which is training healthcare people on the duck, is that part of what you do? Is that when you say, do you go in and show caregivers and doctors, here's how to use it? Is that part of it?
We do, actually. We have a phenomenal individual on our team, Sam Martinez, who's our head of programs, and she joined us from the Starlight Children's Foundation, who deals with hospitalized children. And she'll do that. She'll help explain what the duck is to child life professionals. We also have, we work with 5 child life professionals on our team. Something new that we rolled out with Aflac is that for children whose hospital does not have child life professionals, you can request a duck directly and have a video call with a child life specialist who will train you how to use the duck as a parent and explain what the duck is and talk a little bit about it. So absolutely. Yeah, it's a really important part, whether through actual conversations or whether through, flashcards that we have and all sorts of, I want to say curricula, but that's not really what it is, sort of toolkits for folks to use it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never even considered that part of it, even though, I know that product very well. We have another question from Annalise. Have you noticed a general age range that you've identified this type of play to be most effective? For example, how do 10 or older year olds respond? I mean, I know we talked about adults, for Purrbles and everything like that, but the duck as an example is clearly designed for younger children. But what have either of you seen in terms of this type of anxiety reducing buy-in play for older kids or even adults?
You could go for it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, and not in general health, but for children with an illness, cancer, sickle cell disease, diabetes, or rare disease, when you have something that's just like you, it bucks the typical trend of what you would think of as the transition from soft-bodied plush to hard-bodied dolls, right? So what we see for most of our products is 3 to 13. And you might, if you're in the toy world, you might say that's ludicrous, right? You're covering like 3 different big developmental jumps there. But the ability to see yourself in the product really carries it through. I've been to a diabetes camp where 16-year-old boys fought over who got to take home these plush, Rufus the Bears. And that was awesome. And they were posting photos on Instagram. And it's because it's something that shares your experience. And so I really think the age range is broad. We say 3 to 13. We have people in their 20s who are requesting these products. And as I shared with Purrble, we have adults. So I think that these toys really break down the categories of what you would think of as the typical age groups if you were to just look at it and not know what its functional purpose is.
Totally. I think we're seeing similar in my sister's testing in her clinic. She sees everyone through till 19-year-olds as well. And we even noticed younger. So some of the little things that we're doing, again, we'll get a 5-month-old to stop crying and goes up to, she noticed at like 7, 8, they're like, I don't know if I need this, and like, that's fine. But they weren't like, I don't want this. They're like, I just don't know if this is for me, but it's still more fun than not having it. Right. And I think it all goes back again to storytelling and being mindful of your audience. I think you can use the same tool for a 5-month to 1-year-old and tell a really cute sounds and showing it in their face and just being really playful with it. And then when you have an 18-month to 3-year-old who's understanding it a little bit more, it's like, this monkey is going to be what does this with you. And then you have a 4-year-old, it's like, here, play with this monkey. Like, if you understand all the different stages of kids from 0 through till 13, you really could use story to cater to the different age groups.
I think also, this is a speculation on my part, but I'm imagining that in a healthcare situation, there are certain barriers that are going to drop in terms of, this is too baby for me, or I shouldn't like it, because you're already in a scary environment and you're already all about being helped. Like if you took Jerry the Bear to a middle school and gave it to a bunch of boys there, they would, I'm guessing, reject it wholeheartedly. But in a different situation, there's a safety to it where I think letting yourself feel younger and feel more like a child could be actually comforting.
Absolutely. Where you don't, I don't want to say revert, but you rely on some of those things that are your comfort objects from childhood, blankie, your teddy bear, whatever it is. You're in that place where you really are seeking comfort.
Totally. Like we did with, I think, your friend from Starlight, but we did an activation at a children's hospital with Starlight in LA. And we gave out fairy finders to every kid that walked in that was an outpatient. And no matter what age, as young as 2 up until 15, like having this magical jar that's lighting up, that's catching fairies for anyone that's stressed waiting to go to the doctor is a really welcome distraction, right? And so it really, I think we're in a, to your point, Josh, different environment, different level of what is fun and is going to help the anxiety levels of the situation.
So I want to get a little bit back to the question I asked earlier in terms of what's next. And, there's kind of an elephant in the room these days around kids' products of AI. And I'm working a lot in that space, seeing all the issues and all the stuff. Is that something that is on your radar in terms of what you're trying to do and deal with in terms of, safety and making it fun and everything? Or is that just not a concern? And if that isn't, what other new things are of interest for you?
I mean, it's an area that's of massive interest for us right now. On a kind of personal level for our work, we're very interested in broadly in how tools like LLMs, like generative video that just came out this week, can be used to translate things to people across varying degrees of health literacy. We have a massive problem globally that the clinical trials that we conduct for drugs that everybody will take are not representative. The populations that participate in them are not representative of the populations that will take them. And it's largely, because of a whole history of distrust, rightfully so, in the healthcare system. And not to get too historical, but, these awful things like the Tuskegee syphilis trials where, we eroded the trust of communities. And I think there is a massive opportunity for tools like AI to make these things understandable, to make them engaging, to explain for everyone, myself included. I signed up for a clinical trial. I'm in the healthcare field. I did not understand the consent form that I had to sign, an 80-page consent form for a clinical trial, right? There are huge opportunities to not only use play, but to use these types of tools to make it fun, to bring in storytelling, right? So I think that there's a lot there. And then on the broad toy industry, I cannot wait to see children as creators of their own content and to see what that looks like. And I'm excited to see what products get created there.
Yeah. I think I love it personally. Like I would say like my entire deck that I made for my new thing is 100% made in AI. Like I have no, especially as someone who can't draw and who has tons of ideas, like I'm a kid in that sense. So like, I'm very excited to see how kids are using this to create. I cannot draw and I just have ideas all the time. I'm literally on the phone. Like everyone jokes, like I'm always talking to ChatGPT. She's like she's my queen. I use her for everything. But no, I'm really excited to see where it goes in the kid space. I'm very nervous for where it can go in the kid space. I think I get nervous around early adoption items with respect to kids. So I understand it right now for where you're saying it in terms of like, yeah, if for me personally, when I go to the doctor's office, the consent forms is like so relevant to something I just went through. And if I should have thrown it into ChatGPT to summarize, what am I signing my life away to? And I would love for parents to start utilizing these tools to better help their kids' healthcare. Handing over AI tools to kids, unless they are really, really COPA and like vetted and tested, it's still, for me, I still don't understand it yet. And it's going to get there and I'm down for it so much and I love it. And I'm such a big believer of AI, but I just would like for this to slowly, I don't want to see oh no, we didn't think about this and it greatly affects a kid. I'd rather them take all of that into account first and slowly launch it into how kids can play with it. But I've been testing a bunch of startups in that space, in the kid space specifically, and like a lot of apps and things like that. And they're really, kids will be able to start making their own movies, their own storybooks about themselves. And it's really remarkable where it's going.
It is remarkable. I think there's an interesting balance, which gets back to what we talked about earlier, is sometimes there are some kids who love and really want to make their own stories. And there are a lot of kids who want to experience a story that is created for them. So it's a whole balance. We have one other question, which I think is a perfect one to end on, from Ali. Are there organizations, professional, nonprofit, et cetera, that are focused on this healthcare intersection with toy and play? Where might one go if you want to learn more about this space?
Yeah, I think something to definitely look up is the ACLP, the Association of Child Life Professionals. These are folks who are in hospitals who are using play in a therapeutic way with children, among many other functions that they serve, but to help with anxiety and to help with education. They're just an amazing professional organization. And if you have the opportunity to meet a child life specialist, thank them, because they're doing such important work with kids. I think just really quick, and Sydney, please cut me off or jump in, the Starlight Children's Foundation is an amazing nonprofit. Their goal and their mission is to spread joy to hospitalized children, often using play, often using licensed materials like hospital gowns that look like, Marvel superheroes. They do, truly awesome work in the space. Those are two that just pop to mind in the professional lens and in the nonprofit lens.
Yeah, same. I was going to say Starlight's a tremendous organization and one that we really very much supports all the time. And yeah, plan on bringing them into what I'm doing next as well. So yeah, for sure.
Well, big thanks to you guys. You're two of my absolute favorites. Thanks for the wonderful discussion. Thanks to the audience for coming with us on this story, this journey, and asking some fantastic questions. Just a reminder that this has been put on by the Children's Media Association. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join And if you join the Bay Area chapter in the next couple of weeks, you can join us at an in-person party in San Francisco and meet in person. It would be great. All three of us are on LinkedIn. I haven't asked, but I know the two of you well enough that if anyone has questions beyond this conversation, we would love to hear from you. You can always reach out to me as well about any of these questions. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And thanks again for joining. And this will be posted live on the not live. The recording of this will be posted both on LinkedIn and the Children's Media Association website. Encourage everyone to share it if you found it interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.